Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Aura Vasquez, and I am so excited to be here today with you. It's Saturday, perfect time to have a really good conversation with an amazing artist, a political activist, and also a abolitionist. He will be explaining to us more what even that means. And I'm excited because I'm going to have a conversation with him about my run for Democratic Party delegate. So have your questions ready, and I'm just waiting for him to join me on the stream, and then we'll be all set. There you go. Hello there. Hi, how is it going?
How are you?
Okay, let's see. Let's figure out the sound situation
Yeah.
here. Okay, it's good. Lowering everything. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm so glad to have you here today and have a conversation about life, about who you are, and about my run for Democratic Party delegate.
Of course. I'm glad to be here. It's my pleasure, of course. And I'm excited that you're running. Like, we need somebody to run, for delegate. That's not what the powers that be want in their life at all. So, I think that's
Yeah,
good because,
definitely.
like you say, like, let's end these backroom deals and under the table handshakes. And, that's what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Both parties are
And
guilty.
I'm glad that you're leading or you're starting this conversation with that exactly because I'm a pretty political person, as you are. We're very
Mhm.
involved in our communities with our different issues. I have been, working, leading the environmental, movement and environmental justice in Los Angeles for a really long time. And I had no idea how even the process of democratic delegates work. I mean, did you know?
Yeah, to a degree, as much as anybody knows, I think. I mean, like, because, like, it's very different depending on the state you're in, depending on the district you're in. Everybody has different rules. Some people are still on archaic appointments of delegates. Some people allow democratically elected delegates, quote unquote. They always have some, fine print around that, democratically elected part. Like, I don't know the last time I was ever notified I could vote for a delegate my lifetime, and I've lived in 5 states, like, for long periods of time. So I don't think it's something we're supposed to know we can do.
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of ironic because it should be a democratic process from the Democratic Party, but it actually couldn't be more nebulous in kind of in closed doors, which one of the things that I want to do when I become a delegate is to make this process a little more accessible for everyone. There is tons of people in the community that should be running. They should be our delegates from the
Hmm.
Democratic Party, and they don't even know how to run, or they don't even know that they can run for
No.
Democrat for delegate.
Yeah, by design, the system is not meant for them to know this, and that's problematic in its, own self. And what's interesting to note is this is so controlled by, the powers that be, that if you look at
Mhm.
District 50, which is the most populated district in California, which is the most populated state in the union, right? Look what that district is on paper. It's very blue, right? But look at the delegates. Look at the delegate counts on people who are elected. And 9 times out of 10, you see a GOP candidate elected. I mean, how much of a
Mhm.
majority do the Republicans have delegate wise in the 50th? A lot. And that does not match up with the way the 50th district
Yeah.
votes. So I find that very interesting, that it's that much of a suppressed process, that the Republicans, who are the minority here, like, politically, are able to get their tentacles into that part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I want to let people know is that every 2 years, according to your assembly district in California, people that are part of the Democratic Party can run for delegates. So, you may be listening to us right now and you're like, oh, yeah, that sounds shady. Like, why isn't this something that you advertise and people even know? And traditionally, people have been elected to be a delegate with a handful of votes, 50, 100, 200, in a place where 70,000, 100,000 people can vote. So that's really...
I've seen 29 be the total vote count in like very populated areas, so that's pretty scary. I see that on city council sometimes too, depending on where we're talking about. But there's cities where there's a population of around 70,000 people, maybe 30,000 people, and the entire number of votes in that person's name is really like 31 people. It's like 31 people decided like they didn't know enough or care enough and didn't even fill out any name on the box. So it's very controlled as to who you can vote for. And obviously this problem extends to primary elections and everything else as well. So that's problematic in itself. And that's why we need to really get involved more in the government. I hear that a lot where people say like, we're all in LA and we're throwing stones at a glass castle in Washington, D.C. And they might be right because of the fact, that at the end of the day, like that is what we're doing. Like if we wanted to be changing the system, we need to be the system. I mean, the baby boomers were in power at age 30.
Yeah.
How many millennials are in any representative capacity at age 30, democratically elected? None. Like one, but AOC, you know what I mean? That's kind of not how things should go.
And AOC was much of an outsider that kind of built up her own movement and rally up working class people that felt that this is the perfect example that felt that who the Democratic Party endorsed, and these are also the delegates. The delegates get to endorse candidates.
Yeah,
they get to pass resolutions.
Yes.
So bringing back the conversation about AOC, the Democratic Party didn't endorse her. They endorsed the incumbent, the old school, the powers that be, because that's just how it is, because he was also the chair of the Democratic Party in New York.
Isn't that interesting? And he didn't live in the state.
Yeah.
Like,
so
really?
this is why it's so important that we all get involved and that you get involved in making sure that we have good delegates that represent our interests at the Democratic Party.
Right, because the Democratic Party has made it clear they don't intend to bring the Breathe Act anywhere near the, House floor or Senate floor. Like that's something you would in turn be empowered to be able to do, is bring the Breathe Act to the attention of the Democratic Party and demand that it, is paid attention to, at least on a state level, which would force the Fed in turn, to be able to look at it and be forced to reckon with it in a way, because other people would jump on board with this once the cat was out of the bag. And Joe Biden and his team are doing everything they can to make sure that cat never gets out of the bag within their elite circles and whatnot. And yeah, it's just, we don't need that. We need accountability. We need transparency. And I think we need the people running the government, because as of right now, I mean, look what's happening with the discussions around COVID relief and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the government's not functioning. I don't see a point in our government right now. They failed during COVID. Like, I think we would have been better off left to our own devices at this point. They aren't providing relief in the wealthiest nation in the world. They are using the American people as political chess pieces to get, their agendas met, when there's actual human life and like mental health and, people unable to eat on the line right now, and they couldn't care less. They forget who they work for. And this is something politicians constantly do, is they forget who they work for. And it's a little bit appalling to me that people forget who they work for, when it's literally part of your life every, 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, depending on what office you hold, to get people to vote for you. So how quickly they forget these people are your constituents, this is who you're accountable to, is truly appalling.
And it's interesting, when you run for city council or run for office, they constantly say to you, like, don't worry about it, because people will forget. So the work can never be constant. And now that I'm endorsing to this idea, but you talk to consultants that run political campaigns and they're like, oh, don't worry. Right before the elections, this is when you need to start talking about your election. And that's a big problem, because we need an electorate that is educated.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why decided to start these conversations. The elections for delegates are in January, so we don't have any time to waste. You can register at grassrootsslate.com/vote. And even if you're not in my assembly district, in district assembly district 50, which is Richard Bloom, even if you're not in my district, please register to vote, because you can vote for somebody amazing in your own district that maybe needs your support. This is like the most local way that we can influence our political process and the things that are happening. So guys, I cannot address this enough, how important this is. And the reason why I took this on, because it's so important that people like us that share our values. I'm a renter. I was an undocumented student. I have been an environmental justice organizer for the past 10 years. I ran for city council. I deeply care about bringing change. My ambitions are not motivated by some sort of power. I believe that we can really reimagine the Democratic Party and do it together and make it better and make it work for people that are in so much need right now.
Yes.
To have support, especially now, in this post-COVID. And you have been working on the abolitionist movement, and a lot of people maybe that are watching are like, what is even that? They're like, what does that mean? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your work too.
I think it's intersectional with your work. Ideally, it would be, at least, ideally our elected officials would be paying more attention to what, we the people are asking for, which is complete abolition of oppressive systems. And like a lot of people hear the term abolition and they get scared. Those same people were scared when they heard the term abolition of slavery in the 1800s, but that happened. And now that's looked upon as, something that everybody thinks is so tragically messed up in America's past, but like we're still doing it. The 13th Amendment's still a thing. There's still prisoners in prisons getting abused every single day who are building drones for Lockheed fucking Martin. That's not what's up. And that's still modern day slavery, and it's very racially targeted. So when we look at those details and the Gettysburg Address is a perfect example of, just completely baseless rhetoric. Lyndon Johnson, Civil Rights Act, same thing. Joe Biden right now, same thing. But the way I'm looking at it is Lincoln never said he freed anybody. He said 3/5 of a person. He said that explicitly, clearly enough that at age 7, the first time I ever had that read to me in school, I literally asked the teacher, what are you talking about? What I heard was 3/5 of a person. That's not freedom. That isn't equality. How can you give this guy credit like that? And he was a Republican. And both parties have changed hats. Like there was the Whigs and the Republicans. Some of the Republicans were the liberals. And then, things happened. And now there's Democrats. And the Democrats, got more traction with FDR and things like that. And now people look at that as a bad thing. And it's like people built this entire country on Social Security. I'm getting far away from abolition. I'm sorry. I'm talking about I just
no, keep it going because it's necessary.
But yeah, the Democrats don't care about these things, and they claim to care about the people, and the people are suffering. There's too many Americans under a form of incarceration. There are too many Americans who are not allowed to vote. There are too many Americans who have had their citizenship status revoked or denied, or the citizenship test is insanely messed up.
There are thousands of people in prison right now that are infected with COVID. We have a crisis right now. So yeah, please go on. There's so many things to abolish, I guess.
But it's not that we're breaking something down. It's that we need to replace it with something better. We don't want to look like the French did after their revolution, where they just handed back power to oppressive systems because they were like, oh my God, we need a healthcare system. We didn't really think about that. We were just at war. We're not going to war. We're really just going to make our voices heard. And so when we abolish prisons, it's not that we just abolish prisons and there's no one getting, any consequences or accountability. That's not how it's looking. It's looking like we want to abolish prisons so there is no more school to prison pipeline. That's why we want to abolish prisons, because that funding is a waste. It's an excessive waste, and it's a human rights abuse. And we need to move that into prevention, community care, healthcare, like that's a basic human right. Shelter, basic human
Yeah,
rights. We need to meet these needs before we call people criminals when society fails them. That's reality, and society's failing people. And we don't live in a
absolutely.
world where everybody needs to be, excluded from society because they're not meeting some crazy notion of, white supremacist society value. Like, that's not okay. That's not the country
Yeah.
we live in. It's sure as hell not the country we are told we live in as children. Nobody believes in
Mhm.
this, and the people who do are like transparently evil at this point. And
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
the
And
short story about it.
imagine if we had a Democratic Party that when somebody comes to ask them for endorsements, that they can speak these type of languages, that they can say, are you going to stand for our unsheltered community by supporting more services? Are you going to start for the immigrant community by supporting keeping the families together? Are you going to, so there's so many, are you going to fight climate change and bring a Green New Deal or bring Los Angeles to 100% renewable energy? Or or lowering pollution so people don't die from asthma. 2 days ago, for the first time in history, somebody was recognized cause of death was pollution. We're dying from pollution now, guys. So this couldn't be more important. And I encourage you to register to vote. This is a really, really important process, registering to vote. And like the best thing now is that it comes to your home. Your
Yeah.
absentee ballot, you just slip it in the mail, and you just fill it out. I'm part of the Grassroots Slate, which is an amazing group of folks doing really good work. And let's get going. We
Yeah.
definitely need more. We need more people really fighting for good things for our communities at all levels. And this is like the most fundamental grassroots local level to get involved. So please learn more and get involved.
But that's what we did successfully. So we can do this. Like, we have to remember that's how we got Measure J passed. We have to remember that's how we got rid of Prop 25. And we also have to remember how people will
Yeah.
use that against us. Look what they're doing right now. It's important. I'm sorry, I have to bring this up. I feel like it's my obligation right now to bring it
Yeah.
up. But, like, Prop 25 is now being weaponized against the people of California, saying the people of California didn't want $0 bail because they didn't want Prop 25. Prop 25 was inherently racist. It was a hard no. Like
It
that,
was
but
it was
that's the
a tough
language from
one.
Sacramento.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
language coming from Sacramento, because it was worded as if it was something everybody who voted for 47 and, yeah, like, Measure R, Measure J, even, like, it was worded so that these things would be like, all these things would landslide the same way. They portrayed it as a anti-incarceration bill, and it was literally one of the most racist and discriminatory and non-transparent systems they could have put on paper, but they did it in very carefully worded ways. And that's not okay. So, like, now they're weaponizing that against us over in the Capitol. They're saying, oh, the people
Absolutely.
didn't want it. And it's like, that's how we got the DA in. That's how we got Jackie Lacey out. That's how, like, we did this as a community. It wasn't the Democrats. Like, ask Democrats how they feel about prisons. They'll tell you build more.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, it
Now
wasn't them.
we have fundamentally we have a party that is broken for a lot of us. Maybe
Mhm.
it's working for some people. I'm sure it is, but it's
It,
in a lot of ways it's broken.
it
And
works
we
really
need
well
to.
for people with the position to do tax write-offs. That's what they do. Like people who are
Yeah.
very moderate, which I
Yeah.
consider very far right of center, they're just Democrats so that they feel better at night. They're about the people, and they donate to these pointless charities at the end of the year in quarter 4 to get the money back in their taxes and get a little rebate from the IRS. That's all it is. It's not like it's good people. It's
Yeah.
not like Donald Trump is the monster and Joe Biden's the hero. Like, Joe Biden did the super predator walk and dance, and like, we have to hold that accountable. And the way he's treated,
Yeah.
like, Black Lives Matter as an entire political action committee he got elected on the backs of the people, and he won't give the
Yeah.
people a seat at his civil
And
rights.
like we see it right now with Georgia. We see
Yeah.
it so much with Georgia because a lot of folks did voted for Biden because they didn't want to vote for Trump. But down ballot, they still voted Republican. So there is so much opportunity that we have to make the party more accessible, more accountable. This is the other thing that I thought it was pretty interesting. You hear delegates, you maybe know one or two delegates in your life, maybe you know somebody that ran for delegate at some point. How do you hold a delegate accountable? There's no
You
accountability. Or how
can't.
do you hold the party accountable?
You
There's no
can hold the party
accountability. There's no
accountable, but you cannot hold a delegate
by moving
accountable.
to
You're
another
right.
party.
Yeah, yeah. But by
Yeah.
holding a Democrat, I mean, for you, if you're a delegate, you'll be. I have the utmost confidence that you will be almost too transparent with the
Mhm.
people you represent. That's the only way you know what a delegate's up to, because
Yeah.
there's no transparency checks on delegates at all.
You can even find their names on any website. If you
No,
want, please do me a favor. If you want to do an experiment, go and Google California Democratic Delegates and see if you find any list somewhere. Like it's the most nebulous. And maybe it has something to do with transparency, but we have to do better. And the idea that you have to re-register to vote is also completely suppression of your right to vote, especially for your own party. This is like the most, which should be the example.
yeah, and it's also a divisive thing they do. I have to register 2 times every single time I vote because of the fact that I refuse to register as a Democrat, Democratic Socialist. Like, I register nonpartisan because, like, I say
Mm.
I'm not going to be part of one of these treasonous parties, and they don't like it. They get mad, and they make me wait in line twice every single time I vote, just to like make sure I meant to put nonpartisan. I'm like, yeah, I'm 100% sure I meant to put that. I don't need like random calls from Joe Biden's team and all the primary candidate teams in the middle of my day. Like, I do that. I don't need that, you know? So, like, yeah,
Yeah,
nonpartisan all the way. But like when it comes to getting you elected, I might have to register as a Democrat. And
I
that,
love it. Thank
that
you
hurts
so
my
much.
heart a
That's
lot.
simple.
It really does, though. Like, I've told so many orgs, you know what I mean, that I won't register as a Democrat. It's hurt me, and like it's now I'm like, I do need to get you elected. Like, I can always re-register next time as nonpartisan again, but like, you know, as long as you're a delegate, I can trust Democratic Party more than I can trust no party or the Islander.
Totally. And I my first taste of the delegates, or at the beginning, when I ran for city council in March, and I went through the process of seeking the endorsement of the party. I mean, I knew that they were not going to be for me because I know that in a lot of ways, getting endorsements feels like being popular in high school. You kind of have you know what I mean? You maybe run track, and your fellow track people are your homies, and they elect you whether they like you or not. But that's kind of how we feel sometimes with these endorsements. Just real talk, of how the experience was for me. There were other moments where I went to endorsement meetings where I really spoke from my heart, and people were moved by what I said, and they were like, "We want to endorse you," and I was like, "Oh wow!" Like, I didn't take those things for granted. But when it came to the Democratic Party, I have no idea that, for example, one of my opponents, Mark Ridley Thomas, who is actually the council member right now, he's been working the delegates for decades.
Yeah.
So he's been helping people get elected as delegates. So this is kind of how the flow works. So they help you or they appoint you because elected officials immediately become delegates as soon as they get elected. They don't have to run, or there's 3 ways to get being a delegate. You can run, like how I'm doing it, because I like my democratic process. You can get
Member of
appointed.
Congress. And yes.
You can get appointed by your assembly member or a member of your in your district, or you get elected as a elected official, and then you become a super delegate. So this idea of the super delegates really comes from having a slightly more power than everybody else. And the super delegates get to appoint other people. Let's say I was your assembly member, and I'm like, you know what, Crash, please, I'm gonna appoint you. But what happens if I appoint 6 people? Those are 6 votes,
Mm-hmm.
and people better vote my way because I just appointed them. You
Well,
know what
yeah,
I
if they
mean?
don't,
So,
they lost their
so
job,
this
period.
is why the power gets so entrenched, and the power is just stays in that, like, what do we call that, behind closed doors, or the revolving door, or the powers that be, because if you're not in that little in the machine, so then you don't have a chance. So my opponent got, when I ran for city council, he got 60% of the votes. I got 39 or so votes, which I thought it was a miracle because like I have never really worked. And somebody after this process told me, Aura, you need to work the delegates.
Yeah.
This is how it is. And I was like, what delegates? So this is why we're having this conversation, guys. If you guys are just tuning in, welcome. We are in conversation with CrashBarbosa. Please feel free to post your questions on the comments. Feel free to post your opinions on the comments. This is a conversation I wish it was more open so we can all kind of jump in, but technology hasn't got us there yet, but we will, I guess, at some point. Crash is an artist. He is a political activist. You are also a vegan.
Yeah, I am.
And talk to us about that, because even me as an environmentalist, I feel a little terrible about not being a vegan, even though I eat very little, I consume very little animal product, and it's just me, and very responsibly. But I wouldn't say that I'm a vegan. So share with us a little bit about why you became a vegan and what has been your work around animal rights and just like in climate change.
Well, it starts with, if you look at the Farmer John slaughterhouse over in Vernon, which is a shady little city. Let's not even go into Vernon, because I could talk about Vernon's shadiness for like hours.
Please talk to us about that. Take us from the top, because I don't even think people know Vernon. People go to downtown Los Angeles and they don't even know what's going on over there. So please tell us.
Okay, so Vernon's a shady little spot between downtown LA and East LA, but it's technically East LA, but
it's a city.
There's 112 residents in Vernon. There are the amount of funding they get is shady because it used to be a railroad town where a lot of people made under the table deals. So Vernon is its own cesspit of corruption, like from city council, from the mayor, all the way down to the police force. Like, there's not one person who lives in Vernon who isn't on the take. Somehow they're on the take. They're getting bribe money, and that's how that city exists and always has, and that's fine with Vernon. Vernon also houses the Farmer John slaughterhouse, which provides you guys Dodger dogs to go to watch the Dodgers. Yeah, that slaughterhouse alone contributes. By the way, the only airflow it has goes towards East Los Angeles and South Los Angeles, which is no accident. And there's 70% higher rates of cancer due to the carbon emissions put out from these animal factories, where they're slaughtering pigs shamelessly. And it's absurd and it's atrocious. I don't want to guilt anybody into being vegan, because I think we all could do better with our carbon footprint. No, I could for a fact. But what I saw when I went to an animal rights protest is we went to give water to the pigs that were about to be slaughtered. These pigs had been in this cage on the back of a truck for 5 weeks with no food, no water, nothing. Like, they're eating each other, terrible shit. And there's terrible human rights violations that go on within slaughterhouses and any animal factory, because of the fact that it's very hard to get a job there if you aren't able to be exploited. So typically it's illegal immigrants, people they can blackmail and things like that, who are working in these facilities. So it's really traumatic for everybody involved. So we were giving water to the pigs. I noticed that some people were giving pigs, water that was not being shared correctly, and pigs were biting each other. I immediately saw myself as when I was in a cage, like it was someone throwing a bag of coffee into the tier with no, coffee on the tier. And like, that's how that would go, is the last person standing would have the coffee if you were in jail. And so I saw that, and immediately, like, knee-jerk reaction was like, hey, like, you need to give this pig water, separate these two. Like, I saw what was happening, and I had mutual interest with them and their animals, and that boggled my mind a little bit. And so that's when I knew I was a problematic person by not being vegan, and the dairy industry is far more abusive than the meat industry is, but they're all the same industry. At least the meat industry is the end of an animal's suffering, though. Dairy, like, they're actually raping animals to create cheese. So everybody who loves cheese, like, that's coming from like very evil ways of, I think everybody should watch a video who's watching this. It's called Dairy is Scary. It's 5 minutes long on YouTube, and it will blow your mind. Like, it's very informative, and it gives very, very accurate information and graphic imagery of what is done to animals to get dairy. And it's just not okay. And we can't abolish things for humans and not for animals. I think that abolition and freedom from oppression has to be just universal thing. Like, I think the more cruelty there is in humanity, the more cruelty will continue to transpire, and
for animals. And I just want to say that I'm definitely know that what affects us affects everything around us, including our animals. And sometimes animals can be so much more intuitive than we are as humans, and we're animals too. But that's we're a different species of animals. Animals serve a incredible. They do an incredible job in so many ways, supporting the chain of nature. And like I said, I am not 100% vegan, but I support much of that movement, and I also try to consume meat in a very responsible way, which I'm sure some of my fellow vegans folks are gonna be like, no, dude, that doesn't work. When I ran for office, one of the pieces that I was supporting was a Meatless Monday. Just kind of incentivizing or just making it more accessible for people that nobody's trying to take. This isn't a conversation about the First Amendment, which has nothing to do with guns. But because I feel like sometimes when you tell people about like stopping eating meat, they feel like, oh, you're gonna take my guns next. I'm like, you don't even have a gun. Relax. And if you do, nobody's trying to get your guns away.
No one's California already took as much of it as they can on all accounts. Like
exactly.
It's not happening. Not happening.
But that's so interesting that people take this conversation about being like eating less meat and being vegan to like a whole other conversation about like, oh, and what's next? You're not gonna let me say what I want, and it's not even about that. It's also a health. I mean, consuming less meat or consuming no meat is way better for your health.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely know that, and bringing it back to the conversation about being a Democratic Party delegate. Imagine if we had a Democratic Party delegate that passed a resolution saying we should consume less meat. It's better for the environment, and it's more better for animals, and it's better for people. Or closing this particular place that you're educating us about, which is extremely important.
Needs to close.
So
it needs to close.
This is the little nuances, guys, that we didn't know. And then the topic of climate change, the Democratic Party allowed their people that come for their endorsements to take fossil fuel money, and that needs to end right the fuck now.
Yeah,
that needs to end right now.
Yeah,
people cannot be taking money from the fossil fuel industry. If you want to run for office, you should not be celebrated for doing that.
No,
you should not.
No,
and the Democratic Party should pass a resolution saying that a no fossil fuel pledge for anyone that is coming to take their endorsement. So that's where I'm at right now with that. Go ahead, Crash.
No, absolutely facts. And like, I think it's also important to note while we're on this subject is that like Phil brought up something that I hinted at in very measured J-esque language. But yes, obviously, East LA and South LA are predominantly not white areas, and that slaughterhouse is polluting and killing Black and brown people in LA. That's facts. Like I didn't get that, into that, but that's exactly what is happening. And it's really bad. What is also important to note is that dairy is deeply problematic, like on the same level that meat is. And it's literally poison to the human brain. It does a lot of things to block your, it will cut your frontal lobe into Swiss cheese. It's damaging to the human body. Doctors were paid to say this was healthy once upon a time. I also think it's very important to note that the
Yeah.
Republican Party is heavily funded by the meat and dairy industry. So if for no other
Yes.
reason,
And
let's
by
stop
the fossil
consuming.
fuel too.
Yes,
Yes.
for sure. For sure. And that's the bigger issue, is that like people are eating against their best interest. They're buying and purchasing against their best interest, not looking at who this money ends up in the pockets of and what evil it wreaks on the, world afterwards. And like the reality is, when people are like, oh, are you going to take away my meat next, my guns next? Like we don't have enough animals to feed everybody 40 years from now, period. That's a scientific fact. So like, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, everyone will be vegan whether they like it or not in about 30, 40 years. There's almost no more fish left to eat. There's none in the Pacific Ocean. That's eradicating with radiation, Fukushima on an expedited
Well, and
level. But
plastic,
the Atlantic's running out
because a
too.
lot of our plastic ends up in the ocean and is killing everything. Is clearing is killing coral, is killing our marine vegetation, is destroying our food chain. If you eat
Yeah.
fish, you're totally right. It's about to go down because all the plastic, and especially with the pandemic, because we all panicked and everybody was like, don't touch anything, put everything on plastic. All of that plastic ends up in the ocean, friends. We need to live in a plastic free world. We can't be
Yes.
using straws. We can't be using plastic bags. We need to bring our reusable stuff. And that was so painful for me to see with the pandemic, that now, we go to the store and we have to take the plastic bags. We got to do better. We got to do better. And we cannot panic when these situations happens. We got to think about it holistically and environmentally too. That is like killing our oceans. So absolutely, like I mean, this importance of climate change is so interrelated to so many things. We just talk
Yeah.
about being vegan. We just talk about being plastic free, the fossil fuel industry.
I mean, well, freedom from oppression is intersectional. So I
Yeah.
think that's not a coincidence that all of these things are intersectional, is because I see a lot of people get on a soapbox and talk about one issue or another issue. And it's in reality, that's a very one-dimensional message. And it's like, as leaders, I don't think everybody should be as one-dimensional if they have an intersectional priority that they're trying to push as legislation, or that they're trying to push into people's minds and hearts. Like we're all fighting the hearts and minds war right now. Like, that's what this is. And so if we're fighting for like the hearts and
Absolutely.
minds, which is a war term, but it's still an appropriate propaganda term, that's what we're doing. And we need to recognize that. Like when people tell me, and I hear this often, they're like, I want to be vegan, but sushi. I'm like, well, enjoy it while it's here. Like, because it's not going to be.
Because it's not going to be here for too long and it's not good for you anyways. So I'm having a conversation with Crashbarbosa. He is a abolitionist. We just went over that. He's a vegan. He's an incredible artist and a political activist. We are talking about why I'm running for Democratic Party delegate and why all these things are important and how we got to get them in at the very beginning, you all, because this is what it's going to take. I just posted a link of how to register to vote. Please don't waste any day because elections are in January, the second week of January. So everybody needs to get their ballots in the mail so that you can vote for good people. If you live in Assembly District 50, which is Bloom, Hollywood, West Hollywood, Mid City,
The whole
Greater
valley,
Wilshire,
the entire
Santa
valley.
Monica, the Valley, Malibu, Santa Monica,
Agora
and it goes
Hills,
all
even.
the way. Topanga. If you live in
Calabasas.
Calabasas. Where are my peoples of Calabasas at?
District.
Yes.
It's a huge district, like huge in miles, in population, and in demographic. And this is why we see so many GOP delegates in the 50th, is because Calabasas got their tentacles in things and they start to oppose people. And
So
Vernon got their tentacles in some things, and the meat and dairy industry's up in here, and that's bad, and that's reality. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it's one we live in. And we can change that. That's what I'm not trying to discourage anything at all. I'm trying to encourage that everybody needs to come
absolutely.
together and they need to change this system before it changes us.
Us.
Because that's
Absolutely. So if you live in any of these places, call your homies, call your ex-girlfriends and ex-boyfriends, call your
yeah,
future wife,
right.
and tell them to register to vote and vote for the grassroots life and for myself. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I want to change a little bit of the subject because I think that you are working on an album about activism.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us about that.
It's super exciting. I'm working on an album, which is I'm trying not to attack anybody or any systems that are problematic as much as I'm trying to encourage people how to be better when they decide to show up for a cause. So it's like the do's and don'ts. So, there's a song titled Listen to Leaders. That's the first song because that's kind of, what you should do first. You should listen to what leaders are saying because leaders will protect you. That's their job. And if they're not, and I don't mean like, only elected leaders, I just mean community leaders. And if they
Right.
aren't protecting you, they're not doing their job, 100% point blank, period. So listen to leaders.
Absolutely.
Leaders will keep you safe and leaders will keep you on point. Then there's another song called, it goes from that to No Performance Art, which you can imagine what that's about. Where it says, the whole point of that song is like, if you think you can post a black square on your Instagram and that's the extent of your voice and your activism and you showing up, you didn't show up. You just wanted a couple of likes and some social acceptance. That's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you just wanted to be part of the wave that is maybe not really going all the way as much as we need everybody to be involved and participate.
Absolutely. And it also is about, there's other topics, like there's a song called Activism, which is about how the key word of that, the root word of activism is act. So, don't just sit around and do nothing, but do something about it. That's another title. Another title is, viral protection, about, the stingray devices and facial recognition systems that local police departments use to track activists and known leaders and harass them around the world, not just here, because it gets sold to everybody. Deeply problematic stuff right there.
Mhm.
I mean, look in the hack team, look into any of these companies that sell weaponized, literally it's weaponized cyber warfare weapons to the United States, which is against Geneva Convention, against every rule in war that we wrote, but we're still doing it. But they're selling this to the LAPD, and that's completely absurd. This isn't just like they're violating it and selling it to the FBI or the CIA.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, they're selling it to the sheriff's department. That's a gang. Like who knows what gangs they're selling them to? I mean, they don't file the taxes, as like an institution, so we don't know. We just know they're a very profit-driven industry. So how you can protect yourself against things like that? It ranges. A song "Abolition Now," which obviously explains abolition.
When is the album out? When are you dropping the album?
COVID is like creating a couple of delays here and there, but I'm trying to get this out. I'm hoping for Valentine's Day. I hope like COVID
Cool.
doesn't mess that up too much, and I don't think it will. But if it does, the worst case scenario we would be looking at would be the very beginning of the second fiscal quarter. So about, around Easter time at the very, very latest.
Amazing. That's just around the corner. I think we all know how time flies now in times of COVID. We've
Yeah.
seen it all. So amazing that it's just around the corner.
Yeah, I'm very excited for everybody to hear it. And I think it's important that I set an example for other artists and other musicians who are dancing around these topics because they are divisive and because they have shady little moves on their, contract where they're not really allowed to use their voice or go against their board members and the shares they hold in private prisons. So they're just going to continue to say problematic things and encourage problematic behaviors and sound catchy while doing it. And like, art comes from a place of struggle. Art comes from a place of emotion. Historically, the greatest art of all time always has. And I think it's important that we redirect the narrative back to that, where hip hop is what it started as, which was protest.
Absolutely. Protest and a voice to the ones that are being unheard. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am beyond grateful for your time and for your support. You and I actually met in one of these live streams. and have become collaborators and friends and bounce each other's ideas. And I'm just so grateful to have you as part of my team and part of my support. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, dude. This is short shit.
Yeah.
Being an activist isn't easy. It gets lonely too. So you know,
Yes.
the people that I have around me that understand the commitment, you know, I'm like so grateful for them because they're like family to me. And all of you that are watching, thank you so much for joining in today. And please register to vote. Register to vote now, grassrootslate.com/vote. And like we'll talk very soon.
Yeah, we will. And I appreciate your time so much as well. Thank you for having me. I always love these discussions with you. You're very well spoken, very well educated, and I want the people to be more educated about your stance on things so that you're able to, make a change, a better world for everybody who lives in this world. And I
Absolutely.
you and your efforts.
Absolutely. We'll put this up on Instagram and I'll hope that you can share it with your networks. Thank you, everyone. I hope that everybody has a wonderful Saturday. I'll be back on Monday with another conversation with some other friends. And thank you. We'll talk very soon. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.